What if the problem is not your strategy, but the way you trade it? What if you are not wrong about the market, only wrong about how you behave inside it? Most men never ask that question. They believe that if they study enough, if they learn enough, if they improve their method, the results will follow. And for a time, that belief feels reasonable, because the market does reward understanding. It does respond to patience. It does move in ways that can be observed and learned. But then something begins to happen. You start to see the market more clearly. You understand direction. You recognize patterns. You begin to feel that this time it makes sense. You take a position, and in many cases you are right. The market moves exactly where you expected it to go, and yet you do not profit from it. For many years, I watched this happen to men who were far from foolish. My name is James R. Keene. I spent much of my life observing speculation, not only through price, but through the behavior of those who believed they understood it. And over time, I noticed a pattern that appeared again and again, one that most traders never recognize while they are living through it. They were often right. They saw the move, they understood the direction, they anticipated what the market would eventually do. But they could not stay with it. They entered too early when the market had not yet decided. They exited too early when the move had only just begun. They adjusted their position when nothing needed to be changed. They reacted to small movements that meant very little and ignored the larger movement that mattered most. And when it was over, they were left with the same question. How can a man be right and still lose? At first, the answer does not seem obvious. It feels like bad timing or bad luck, or perhaps just one mistake made at the wrong moment. That is what most men believe. But the truth is rarely found in a single mistake. It is found in a pattern. Because the market does not take money from those who are wrong. It takes money from those who cannot remain right long enough for it to matter. Most men who reach this point believe they are close. They have studied the market, they understand direction, they recognize when something is forming, and for the first time, it feels different. This time it works, this time it makes sense, this time they are not guessing. They begin to trust what they see. They wait for the setup, they follow their rules, they take the trade, and for a moment everything appears correct. The market moves in their direction just as expected, just as planned, and that small confirmation begins to change something inside them. It builds a quiet belief that they are finally in control. But control in speculation is a fragile idea. Because the market rarely moves in a straight line, and the moment it begins to move against them, even slightly, that belief is tested. At first it feels like nothing, just a small fluctuation, something that should be ignored. But then it continues, just enough to create doubt, just enough to make the position uncomfortable. And this is where the shift begins. The trader who once followed a plan now begins to question it. He watches every movement more closely, not with clarity, but with tension. He looks for confirmation that he is still right, and when he does not find it immediately, he begins to feel something else. Uncertainty. He adjusts his position not because the market has changed, but because the feeling has. He reduces risk too early or exits entirely, telling himself he will re-enter when things are clearer. It feels like a smart decision. It feels like control. But the market does not respond to feelings. And more often than not, the moment he exits, the market begins to move again, quietly at first, then with confidence, continuing in the exact direction he had anticipated from the beginning. He watches it happen. He sees the move he was waiting for, and he is no longer part of it. This is the moment that confuses most men because nothing appears obviously wrong. The analysis was correct, the idea made sense, the direction was clear, and yet the result is the same. No profit. So he tries again. Another trade, another opportunity, another moment where it feels like this time it will hold. And again, he is often right, but not in a way that matters. Because being right is not enough, and the market does not reward the idea. It rewards the ability to stay with it. What most men do not see is that this process does not happen once. It repeats. quietly, consistently, in slightly different forms, but always leading to the same place. The trader begins to notice that he is often correct about direction, yet rarely present for the move that follows. And over time, that realization becomes heavier, more frustrating, more difficult to ignore. At first, he searches for a technical answer. He adjusts his entries, changes his timing, refines his rules, convinced that a small improvement will correct the outcome. It feels logical. This must be it. This is the missing piece. But the result does not change. The pattern remains. He is early. The market moves against him just enough to create doubt. He exits. Then it moves in his direction without him. This begins to affect more than his trades. It begins to affect his thinking. He watches the market with more intensity now, trying to anticipate every movement, trying to avoid the discomfort he has felt before. He enters later, waiting for more confirmation, wanting to be certain this time. But by the time he feels comfortable, the move has already begun. Now he is chasing. He enters with less advantage, with less space, with more risk, and when the market pulls back, as it always does, he feels the same pressure again, this time stronger because the position is worse. He exits again, protecting himself from what feels like a larger loss. And once again, the market continues without him. This is how the cycle tightens. The trader is no longer acting from clarity. He is acting from memory, from past discomfort, from the need to avoid what he has already experienced. And in doing so, he begins to shape his decisions around emotion rather than observation. He becomes reactive. He sees movement and feels the need to act. He feels hesitation and interprets it as danger. He feels discomfort and treats it as a signal. But none of these things come from the market itself. They come from him. This is where most traders begin to lose their edge. Not because they no longer understand the market, but because they can no longer separate what they see from what they feel. The two begin to blend, and once that happens, every decision becomes less precise. He is still analyzing, but he is also protecting himself. He is still observing, but he is also reacting, and in that mixture, something important is lost: the ability to remain with the trade long enough for it to matter. Because the market does not move to reward the idea. It moves to test the man holding it. The market does not break a man in a single moment. It does not move suddenly and take everything at once. It works more slowly than that, more quietly, placing him in situations where his own reactions begin to work against him until the result becomes almost inevitable. At this stage, the trader is no longer trying to understand the market. He is trying to manage himself inside it, though he may not realize it. Every position carries weight now. Every movement feels significant. A small fluctuation becomes something to respond to, something to control, something to fix. And this is where the pressure builds. The market moves slightly against him, just enough to create tension, just enough to make the position uncomfortable. He tells himself it is nothing, that he has seen this before, that it will resolve. But the feeling does not disappear. It stays, growing quietly in the background, influencing his attention, narrowing his focus. He begins to watch more closely, not with patience, but with urgency. He looks for reasons to stay, and at the same time, reasons to leave. Every tick becomes a question. Every pause becomes a warning. And without noticing it, he is no longer following the structure of the market. He is following the movement of his own thoughts. This is where discipline begins to slip. Not all at once, but in small adjustments. A trade is closed slightly earlier than planned. Another is entered without full clarity. A position is reduced not because the market has changed, but because the feeling has become too strong. It feels like control, but it is not. Because control in speculation does not come from action. It comes from the ability to remain still when nothing has changed. The market continues to move as it always has, rising and falling, expanding and retracing, testing positions before continuing. But the trader no longer experiences it in that way. He experiences it through pressure, through discomfort, through the need to respond. And that need becomes his weakness, because the market does not need to know what he will do. It only needs to create conditions where he feels he must do something. A move against him creates fear. A move in his favor creates relief. A pause creates doubt. And each of these emotions pushes him toward action, even when no action is required. He exits too early to avoid loss. He re-enters too late to avoid missing out. He adjusts when he should hold and holds when he should reconsider. And through all of this, he believes he is managing risk. But what he is truly managing is discomfort. And the market does not reward that, because the market does not follow his emotions. It exposes them. And once a man begins to trade in response to how he feels rather than what he sees, the outcome becomes predictable, not to him, but to the structure he is now reacting to. At that point, the market no longer needs to challenge him. It only needs to continue. After watching this unfold again and again, I began to see something most men never notice while they are inside it. The problem is not that they do not understand the market. In many cases, they understand it well enough. They see direction, they recognize movement, they anticipate what is likely to happen next, and in quiet moments, they can even describe it with clarity. But understanding is not what fails them. It is what happens after the trade begins. Because once a position is open, the situation changes. It is no longer an idea. It becomes something that can be lost, something that can be taken away, something that must be endured. And the moment that shift occurs, the trader is no longer dealing only with the market. He is dealing with himself. This is where most men lose control. Not because the market has become more difficult, but because the experience has become more personal. A small loss feels larger than it is. A retracement feels like a reversal. A pause feels like danger. And in that space between what is happening and what is being felt, decisions begin to change. He asks how much more he is willing to tolerate. That is a different question, and it leads to different actions. He exits not because the trade is invalid, but because the pressure has become too great. He protects himself from discomfort, not from risk. And once he is out, the position returns to what it always was. Just movement, just structure, just the unfolding of the idea he had seen from the beginning. The market continues. Without him. This is the part most men do not understand. They believe the difficulty lies in finding the right trade, in learning the right method, in improving their analysis. But the real difficulty begins after all of that is done, when there is nothing left to decide except whether to remain. And remaining is not easy. Because the market does not move to confirm belief. It moves to test it. It moves against the position before it moves for it. It creates doubt before it offers reward. It places pressure where there was once certainty and waits to see what the trader will do. Most men do not wait. They adjust, they exit, they interfere, and in doing so they remove themselves from the very move they had understood from the beginning. This is why they feel confused. Because they were right, and yet the result does not reflect it. But the market does not measure correctness in the way they believe. It measures endurance. It measures whether a man can hold an idea long enough for it to become real. And most cannot, not because they lack knowledge, but because they cannot remain unchanged while the market moves around them. In the end, the answer reveals itself quietly, not as a discovery, but as something that was always present. A man can understand the market, he can read it correctly, he can anticipate its movement with surprising accuracy, and still fail to take anything from it, because understanding alone is not what the market rewards. It rewards consistency of behavior. It rewards the ability to remain with a position when nothing has changed, even as everything around it appears uncertain. It rewards the capacity to endure movement that feels uncomfortable, to sit through doubt without acting on it, to allow the idea to unfold without interference. This is where most men fail. Not at the beginning, not in the analysis, not in the selection of the trade, but in the quiet moments that follow, when there is nothing left to do except remain. Those moments feel longer than they are. They feel heavier than they should. And in that space, the mind begins to search for reasons to act, reasons to protect, reasons to avoid what might happen next. This is where discipline is tested. Not as a concept, not as a rule, but as a condition of being. Because discipline is not what a man does when everything is clear. It is what he maintains when nothing feels certain. Most men cannot stay there. They move too early. They interfere too often. They protect themselves from what has not yet occurred, and in doing so, they remove themselves from the result they had already understood. They were right, but they were not there. My name is James R. Keene, and after many years observing the market and the men who believed they understood it, I learned one lesson that remains as true now as it was then. The market does not reward being right. It rewards those who can stay right long enough for it to matter.